Mr. Wilson. I don't have to take that kind of talk from anyone.
That's right, you don't. How about going outside and trying to kick me around?
I'm not supposed to fight with the guests, Mr. Wilson.
I'm not a guest tonight, you yellow bastard. I happen to be an intruder.
Welcome to The Good, the Pod, and the Ugly, a film podcast where we talk the essential filmographies of notable directors and actors each season, along with a number of specials. And often we do this with guests. I'm your co-host, Thomas.
I'm your co-host, Ken. Hi, Thomas.
Hey, Ken. And you might know us from our other podcast, For a Few Collars More, where we talk about BDSM leather gear.
Yeah, that's our moneymaker. And we are joined by Ryan.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. He also does our theme song. Thank you, Ryan. We love our new theme song. I have not gotten a cease and desist yet.
Excellent. Fantastic. You know you're doing someone right if you get the cease and desist, because that means that's, you have a second listener at least.
Yeah. So we are pairing two films per episode. We do a deep dive on the backgrounds of either actor or director, and then we talk about them. Thomas, who are we talking about this season, and where are we in that?
Yeah, we're talking the films of Darren Aronofsky. Of his 8 films, we're on the second. Actually, you know what we do? We do a temporal pincer movement where we talk the first film and the last film, and then the second film and the penultimate film, and so on. You can do the rest of the math yourself. So yeah, we just did Pi. We're on our second episode of the season, part 2, chapter 1, part 2, The Whale.
The Whale.
Can I just say real quick that Christopher Nolan's, or rather Tenet's greatest contribution to cinema, it might be the lasting legacy of giving you guys a term for this approach to film criticism, the pincer movement approach.
To anybody who listened to the 3 seasons of Clint Eastwood, somewhat 70 episodes where we did the same exact thing, and I, for the life of me, could not describe it for all 3 seasons. Tenet was like a godsend, the temporal pincer movement. It finally makes sense. Thanks, Chris.
Oh, so at the end of time, that's what Christopher Nolan's going to be known for, is the good, the pod, the uglies, being able to articulate what this transformative podcast is all about. So 2002, I'm sorry, we're talking The Whale, which is 2022 or 2022. And we've only covered 2 films from that year on the podcast, both of them as follow-ups to previous seasons. And that is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent and The Fabelmans.
Fabelmans is one that I famously like a lot and Ryan hates.
Yes.
Which may replicate itself shortly. I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
We shall see. The Whale was extremely divisive prior to and during its release, other than the Brendan Fraser-sance that I think everybody was on board for.
Brenaissance.
Brenaissance, not the Fraser-sance. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully his sance will not lead to just doing terrible commercials for cars and AI like Matthew McConaughey's McConaissance.
Also, hopefully we get away from the 4:3 aspect ratio. Hopefully that's not coming back.
The McConaissance, the ultimate ending of the McConaissance is, president. That's what he's hoping for. That's where his eyes are.
I thought you were going to say the film Serenity.
No, I'm so eager to see this film, but I have not yet.
I love that it exists. The film Serenity with Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
But it is just such a... We're talking about The Whale, though.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not talking Furry Vengeance 2010s. Brendan Fraser's last time he was like a lead actor. Which is crazy to think. Like, it's hard for me to remember, like, Airheads. He was top billed, right?
Yeah. The Mummy.
Oh, The Mummy and... George of the Jungle. I remember working in a movie theater. No, it was Encino Man. Working in movie theater, and all the girls, they would go into the theater at certain times where Brendan Fraser was, a bit of a thirst trap. That summer, that they were all completely head over heels in love with Brendan Fraser.
Wow. That makes sense, but I didn't know about that at the time. What is
And
your
let's see if they stuck with him through The Whale, though.
Yeah.
It's easy when you're ripped, but so is this the first time for all of us seeing this film? Thomas, did you see it?
No, I saw it in theaters.
Okay. And Ryan, you held off on watching this. We had to
Yes.
cajole you into even considering it.
Yes, we can.
I made you a sandwich that had sedatives in it.
Yes, I had no intention of watching this movie, and we can get into it as much or as little as you guys want to. But I did. I sat down the other night with every intention of watching this movie from start to finish, so that I could talk about it with you gents. After watching the first shot, and then I actually
The bus. You're like, fuck public transportation.
The bus?
Yeah, it opens with a bus.
Oh, I was thinking of our gentleman protagonist.
Okay.
/ monster Jack in it. That's the shot that confirmed that this movie was everything that I thought it was. I watched the first couple scenes and got a sense for it. I then read the wiki, watched 2 scenes in the middle that introduced characters I hadn't met yet, and then watched the last 2 scenes, but couldn't do the whole kit and caboodle this time. So take what I have to think with a brick of salt, you know.
Well, we do miss Jack, and he would often fall asleep during films. So
that's true.
So do you want to talk a little bit about the background of The Whale? It was obviously
an adaptation.
Originally a play written by Samuel D. Hunter, a MacArthur Fellowship recipient.
Ugh, unfucking believable. Go on.
Wait, is this going to be your contribution? It's like the opposite of a hype man. You're just going to be the 2 old man Muppets in the balcony.
He was given money for writing in a profession which normally doesn't see a lot of money, and you're saying fuck that?
No, I'm saying no. I love the MacArthur Foundation. Okay. I'm saying fuck this man, Samuel D. Hunter, and fuck anything that it's unbelievable to me that this man has been rewarded with anything. But I'll I'm drinking the haterade over here, so
you just don't. What is it with you and Idahoans? Is that how you say it? People from Idaho. You're just
Idahoans. Who's another Idahoan? I love Built to Spill. I love me some Doug March.
Well, the writer of the play, and the screenplay, it was a 10-year process going from stage, which Aronofsky saw it and thought it'd be interesting to make a film of, to actually having a script for the film and being able to make it.
Yeah, and Hunter was thinking, like usually when plays are turned into movies, to expand it, to make it less theatrical. And Aronofsky really just wanted a theatrical experience, really setting it in one location and maintaining a lot of the theatrical flourishes of a stage play.
Which I believe, but it did help that maybe the pandemic also limited the amount of exteriors that they would be doing.
So, Hunter has written a number of plays that take place in Idaho, where he's from. A lot of them are named after places in Idaho. He's kind of like Sufjan Stevens when he was going to make an album out of every state.
Loved it.
He's going to do a play for every town in Idaho. He was also the showrunner and creator of the short-lived FX show Baskets with what's his face from the Hangover movies, Galifianakis. Thank you. And he didn't change a whole lot for the adaptation, other than since initially writing the play, he and his husband adopted a daughter, and he was a father now. And he went back and did a number of changes in that relationship of stuff that he could relate to. And he has said that he may even change some of the play to add that level of knowledge that he has now that he's a dad, which I think is interesting, having watched it before I read that. He was much like Brendan Fraser's character, he was a professor teaching remote lessons to, I think it was Rutgers. So he had that part of it. He's a very hopeful, optimistic person in his interviews, and he really sees Brendan Fraser's character as an embodiment of that. And the stuff about him being obese really came about because he wanted something that would kind of force a sense of isolation, a self-isolation, which I think is kind of interesting. But I don't know how much research he did of people who sounds like, other than how long it took to get it made, and Aronofsky really waiting for the right actor, all the boxes that Fraser checked off. One thing he doesn't mention, which I noticed in the movie, is Fraser has always had outsized big eyes, almost cartoonishly big, expressive eyes, puppy dog eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And surrounded by all those prosthetics and the weight he gained, they still shine through. And that's one of my favorite things about the movie, is just how much
How
he
soulful he
expresses with
looks.
it. How soulful he looks. Thank you.
And I think also losing a little bit of his hair in the having thinning hair also helps somehow. But I think a lot of it also is just the lighting. Like, I think that Aronofsky really set himself up with the challenge on this to how to forget you're in a single room, I think is what he said in the making
Yeah.
of features. And so he wanted a bottle story, right? But he didn't want it to feel like it as best as he could. Because I mean, even like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf feels, even though they go to an exterior to like a dance club,
And there's
Nichols,
some
yeah,
outside stuff.
it
too,
doesn't, yeah, but it doesn't really feel like it's a film. It still feels like it's a play.
Yeah. This feels like it feels like a little bit of both to me. I don't know. A lot of the stuff before it came out was centered on it being fat phobic or fat shaming. And Hunter, in an interview, has a really interesting take on it. Of all the productions of the play, it was actually workshopped in Leavenworth, Washington. That every single production he was a part of, the main character actor was in a fat suit. Never got one complaint or anything about it. And that his sense is that film's history has so much of like thin actors putting on fat suits. You have like Mike Myers as Fat Bastard, or Gwyneth Paltrow.
Eddie Murphy.
Yes, and the Nutty Professor. People bring a lot of baggage to a film that has, a guy in a fat suit.
The fundamental issue here, and what this man obviously doesn't understand because perhaps he's never spoken to a fat person, is that it is not the portrayal of obesity that is the problem. It is the centering of this person's being and psychological problems being the cause of his obesity, and that being an inherently negative feature of a person that is A, under a person's control, and B, of such import in our society that people ought to feel terrible about the way they look. It has nothing to do with Brendan Fraser being in the fat suit. It is nobody's body is a symbol for this man's story. And I would suggest that if you made the main character Black or gay or had AIDS or any other physical manifestation that you could think of to describe and portray this person's pain, it would be completely socially unacceptable. It's only because this man is fat that this movie is taken seriously by anyone.
Well, what about movies where the manifestation is drinking? What about Leaving Las Vegas or The Lost Weekend?
Those are written by people who have a deep experience of alcoholism and portray that experience on screen. It's not, the alcoholism isn't a symbol of their, existential flaw and their flaw in society.
But it's how they're dealing with a trauma. And in this case, this is an A24 movie, so it all comes down to grief.
You're comparing a addiction that someone has to a physical way of being. It's in some ways it's like saying, what's the difference between alcoholism and multiple sclerosis?
Well, I am saying that he is eating himself to death the same way Nicolas Cage drank himself to death in Leaving Las Vegas. And I think that as a storytelling, Stellar, I think that's fair. I don't think there's anything.
I think one of the things that didn't maybe come out in the synopsis, and I think we both sides have a good case, right? And so I'm not saying one way or the other, but I do think that it is important that Brendan Fraser's character, and then we could go into I could do my plot synopsis maybe as well, that his character has always been kind of large, he says. And we see old photos of him, like he's not the Brendan Fraser of Airheads or George of the Jungle or The Mummy. Like he's a larger guy. And then after the loss of his lover, who he couldn't be fully public with, they have 2 different rooms that they live in, it seems like, so that he could be a roommate. And his the suicide of his lover, who he left like his whole family for, he like left everything for, and he has nothing, it seems. Then that is when he tries to eat himself to death in the way of somebody drinking themselves to death. Whether that's fit for a film, and if that idea of one's body, metabolism, other parts to it, genetic inheritance is like part of it or not, I'm not so sure. I mean, I also don't fully believe that alcoholism is fully a genetic predisposition. I think that there's addiction predispositions that might exist.
A huge difference here is that Samuel D. Hunter is not a fat person. Okay, so that is the biggest.
So he did lose 130 pounds at one point in his adult life because he was a big guy, much like Brendan Fraser maybe was in some of those photos in the movie, which weren't badly photoshopped like most photos in modern movies. So I appreciate Aronofsky for that. So Hunter may not have been a 600-pound man, but he was quite a bit larger than he is now.
I think the movie is infused with his bias towards that. You can go ahead and get into the plot synopsis. I'll just say that the opening shot of Brendan Fraser is from behind as he is masturbating. He has sweat beaded on his bald head. He's obviously humongously obese. He is a monster, and he is introduced as a monster, and the special effect of his fatness is portrayed in the same way that Todd Browning portrays people in Freaks. Freaks is honest because we are there to gawk at these people. This whole movie is hateful and hypocritical because Aronofsky and this Hunter person are trying to pretend like they are not there to gawk at the fat man, but that is the only thing that this movie is offering.
Yeah, that's interesting because let's come back to that whenever the Thomas character, the missionary, is asked 2 different times by Charlie if he's repulsive. Because I think there's things that are done, right? Like definitely casting Hong Chau as his buddy. She's a diminutive person. She's short. Like the frame ratio is there. Like it's a 4:3 ratio to have Brendan Fraser in a fat suit fill the frame.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely there as a spectacle, and it's there to have him as a monstrosity. But I don't know if the film shies away from it. Okay, cool. Yeah. You got the timer going?
Ready, set, and go.
In the amazing movie The Well by the director Darren Aronofsky, the actor Brendan Fraser recounts his story of feeling great loss. And the first part of his film, Brendan, calling himself Charlie, is in a 2-bedroom apartment, and he is no longer sharing a bed with a man named Alan. And I felt saddest when I watched the boring parts that were only people talking, because I knew that the director was just trying to save us from our own sad story just for a little while. This episode stinks. This parody is so dumb. I love Ryan's takes. Hey, that's a haiku.
Very well done, Thomas. If you have not seen The Whale, there is a recurring plot point, Chekhov's essay, that is the greatest thing his character has ever read, and he will often either read it or have someone else read it when he's having some kind of physical malady.
Yeah. What's really interesting is, like, it really is Chekhov's essay, right? I remember in the theater going, what the fuck is he having read to him? Because that's the opening scene, right?
Uh-huh.
Ryan, maybe you saw, is that he's masturbating. He starts to have a heart attack. There's a missionary there, and he asks the missionary to read him this essay. And as an audience member, you're like, what is going on?
I gotta pause. I'm having technical difficulties.
I can hear that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give me just a second.
I thought it was my headphones.
Thought I might need some trepanation, and it was all in my head.
You thought Clint Marcellus was here?
Yes. That was a throwback to last week's episode where we covered pie.
And if, Ken, would you just go ahead and edit in even more static and drill noises.
I could get louder and louder. I wish it was video so I could make everything turn white.
Check,
and
check,
then
check.
silence. Check, check, check.
Check, check, check.
Yep.
Cool. Sorry about that, dudes.
All right, where were we? We just finished our brilliant synopsis with Chekhov's essay.
Yeah, we're talking about that opening scene that I think we all three saw. Whereas in the theater, like, it's fascinating because you're like, you're alienated. It feels like it might be important, that it might come back. That it does seem like he might be genuine. That it's weird that this essay is the most honest thing that he's ever read. And it takes a good chunk of the movie before we get that he has a daughter, and then even further until we find out that it's his daughter's essay and why it's so meaningful.
I didn't guess the daughter part, but I understood what the essay was as soon as it was happening. I watch a lot of 50s kitchen sink drama films, and this is very, very much the pattern. The model is very similar, so it seemed quite similar to those kinds of movies.
So, Thomas, this was your second viewing. You're the only one amongst us who's watched it twice. What did you think when you first saw it, and how has it changed watching it a second time?
Yeah, I guess I was a little... I mean, I guess there's environment around us that also influences how we go into a film. The first one was great. Like, I watched it in the theater with my spouse and had no preconceptions on what it was going to be.
Uh-huh.
It's for me, it's always a coin toss with Aronofsky. One of the reasons that we're doing this season is that I was so stoked to watch The Fountain in theaters, because I had missed his first two films in theaters, and so I watched Noah, and then we'll talk about my response to that. Mother, which I love. I'll go ahead and put my cards on the table. And so it was like, well, are we back to Noah? Are we back to The Fountain? What is the well is it going to be enjoyable or not? I guess I wasn't eager to watch it a second time. Because I was concerned maybe it was a one-trick pony, and I was concerned. And also at the time, like, we've been in an ice storm here in Portland, Oregon, and I just wanted to get the fuck out of the house. I've been watching super long movies.
Uh-huh.
And doing everything I can to stay sane. And this was just like one more thing that I did not want to, like, I just had to do this week that I would have done freely if I had been able to leave my house, if I wasn't in the Shining scenario with a brand new dog. And so I wasn't eager to watch it. I put it on, and I enjoyed it a second time. And I was surprised at how well stitched together it is. Mm-hmm. And I would really like to talk about the essay and it being used as a narrative technique.
Okay, that sounds good.
We know how Ryan watched parts of this. You can. How did it go down with you?
Well, I didn't see it when it came out or when it was available to watch on video. Some of the reasons are what Ryan spoke about, and kind of baggage that I took with me, and also baggage from like Noah, and the fact that I don't really trust Aronofsky. I know I'm going to get something, but he has made enough things that, like The Fountain, that it just seemed like one that I would sit out. So I was starting watching it. I was, with my arms folded, like a kid getting his medicine, and the theatricality of it, the few opening scenes where people are introduced, I really did not like it. But there was a moment about halfway through, and I think part of what Aronofsky does and understands is that you are going to see Brendan Fraser much the way Ryan saw him being introduced at the start of the film. But once you stop seeing that, it's like I'm going to compare it to Avatar, where you stop seeing it as, CGI blue people, and you just see them as characters in a story. And there's a point where that clicked, and then the theatricality, particularly the knocking of the door, which actually sounds like a knock from a stage and not from a movie, it kind of sucked me in about halfway through. Even though I was like, the daughter's introduced, and she's really smart, but she's angry. And then the missionary, who is not a Mormon in the movie, but was in the play, I was really, really had my walls up against it. But it won me over. And then by the end of the movie, the very end of the movie, man, I have to admit, I was crying. It worked some weird magic on me being resistant to it. And I thought it was great. for that reason.
I guess one of the interesting things watching in the theater is that I didn't, and this might be just my feeling as a spectator or as a viewer, I did not notice that it was in 4:3 ratio. And so I have the Blu-ray checked out from Multnomah County Library, shout out, and I put it on. I was like, oh wait, what's wrong? Did I get did they actually make Blu-rays now that are standard format? Like what's going on? And I looked it up and I was like, oh no, this is right. Like this is the way that this was shot.
Yeah. When it started, I had the same feeling, and I kind of rolled my eyes, saying, "This is like jerk off stuff." But then, I mean, the square frame helps with it's kind of a guy in isolation and putting him in a box. Like Thomas said, when he does stand up, he's even bigger because the frame is compressed. It wasn't just wankery on Aronofsky's part. He had a real visual idea that he wanted to pursue for it, and I think it worked great. Sorry, Ryan.
No. If I might, I know I've already said a piece, and you guys can you guys can tell me to shut up if you want, but
no, we don't have to. Ken will just edit you out.
So I can't wait to get to the Noah episode with you guys. That's going to be very exciting for me because I love that movie. I thought it was very interesting watching this and Pi back to back because Pi is a $100,000 16 millimeter film that is doing everything it can to kick against that box and say, no, this is like a serious movie. It doesn't matter the budget. He's pushing against the limitations every which way he can. And in this movie, he tries to limit himself to his small space and then relies on a special effect to drive the movie. It's almost like the opposite of Pi, where he, the Hollywood budget possibilities allow him to have this focus on the body. I might call it a crutch, but and to really frame a whole movie around that and use the Academy ratio and everything. He's using all of these master filmmaker techniques to make a movie which is intentionally trying to be small, whereas Pi was using all of these DIY techniques to try and make a movie that was really big. So it's a cool exercise in that way, I think.
I mean, it was a $3 million movie, which is pretty crazy to think about. I guess it helps that you're just shooting it all on a sound stage, right?
Yeah, and the actors are working at scale and stuff, It's not like Brendan Fraser is an expensive get.
Yeah, I think I like that the limitations of this more than I do The Fountain. How do you guys feel generally about bottle movies? Because I'm usually opposed. I mean, I know The Hateful Eight and Bug. I like Bug, but that's based off of a play, right?
I think bottle movies are just like any other movie or episode of a TV show. It's like if they work, they're great. If they don't, they're tedious.
Yeah, I would have. I agree with Ken, and I would have said a couple year pre-pandemic. I would have said that I'm not a fan of bottle movies, but I have been watching more 50s movies in particular. And William Wyler adapts a lot of plays, so a lot of his movies end up being bottle movies. And when it's done right, like Then or with The Hateful Eight, it is one of my favorite presentations. But I don't
like The Hateful Eight.
Yes, I agree.
That's a different episode, man.
Yeah, maybe I think Hateful Eight is possibly my favorite Tarantino now, but that is a different episode.
Podcast over.
Oh.
Hanging up on you, Ryan. Those are some hot takes, man. You brought it today.
Yeah. I think I like it typically when the film, or if the play was based off of the idea of a confined space originally, right? Not as I think Bug is, and I think that this film or this play probably was. But yeah, for the most part, I typically don't like it. Though there's a pretty fun film, a French film called Oxygen that came out 2021. Which it's all based off of waking up in in space, in a limited space, almost like a coffin.
Yeah.
and surviving for the length of a feature-length film, which is very claustrophobic.
That sounds amazing. You, I don't know how you into 50 cinema you are, Thomas, but Desperate Hours with Humphrey Bogart.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the first, I forget the genre name, but somebody breaking into someone's home and taking the family hostage.
Yeah.
And then a Detective Story with Kirk Douglas as a cop, and it's all set in the cop in his little the bullpen at a police department in New York. Those are both fantastic bottle movies that really use that the limited space so well.
Yeah, and I think bottle episodes are maybe a little more prevalent now than bottle movies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a thing where some TV series, especially this recently ended golden age of TV, where prestige shows would just do a bottle episode because they could.
Yeah.
Not because of economic restraints on the budget for the season, which is where they first started, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk.
Let's talk about. So I mentioned it in my synopsis of Pi. I find it very interesting, and I'm not saying anything negative about any of this stuff. But Angels in America, Tony Kushner, Mormonism played a big part in the play and in the adaptation that Mike Nichols directed. As a confused young man who is Mormon, and we have that in the Whale. It's called New Life and not Mormon, like it was in the play. I don't know why they changed it to something generic instead of something specific. And his relationship with a gay man, a self-loathing gay man at that. Very interesting, the similarities and the associations I made when that plot started. I was like, wait a second, I've seen something like this before. What is it about Mormonism that is so attractive to these playwrights?
There are a lot of Mormons in Idaho. There's more Mormons in Idaho than there is in Utah, even.
Yeah, and that's part of Hunter's upbringing. What? So in this particular one, what does he represent as representing
As Thomas?
As Elder Thomas, who is somebody who is like on a mission, proselytizing, and then we find out that they don't even do that anymore at his church. That he's kind of been exiled, and that plays a part in the third act with the whale's daughter. What's his name? I don't want to call him the whale, but that's
Charlie.
Charlie, okay, because he's not really the whale. The whale is the whale in Moby Dick and Chekhov's essay.
I don't know. Is he not also Ahab and the whale at the same time? I think that there's something interesting in calling it the whale, having the essay in there, which introduces Melville's Moby Dick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's messy in an interesting way. Like, I think a lesser film might have, or a lesser piece of writing might have had a one-to-one symbology there.
Mm-hmm.
Or like something cleaner, like a quirk for somebody. I just watched Amadeus and RRR this week. And so Amadeus, the protagonist there is always like eating sweets. And in RRR, one person's fire and one person's water. Right, one person's the city, one person's the nature, and so I think, I think in this somehow that obsession, that drive that's self-destructive by Ahab
mm-hmm.
is Charlie, but there is no the object of his destruction is himself. Like he wants to be done with the world, and his plan is to be done with the world. And then let his daughter, played by Sadie, what's his daughter's
Sadie
name?
Sink.
Oh, yeah, but his daughter's the character's name, Ellie, is to have Ellie have the money. Which I think one of the most interesting things is that whenever Liz, his friend, finds out, and sister Liz, his friend, but it's also Charlie's friend, but also the brother, the sibling, the sister to Charlie's lover,
who killed himself.
And that's why she's so upset against Thomas. I think whenever she finds out that he has all this money and he could be taking care of himself, and that her truck's broken down, and there's times that she's like spent a lot of money out of her own pocket.
She
Charlie.
Walked in the snow that one night to get him groceries. as she says
Yeah.
more than once. Yeah.
I mean, it's justifiable that she's upset with the situation, as is like Charlie, and she's both like trying to save him and enabling him at the same time.
She is the most interesting character because of that, those two things of helping and enabling at the same time. And she's another character who, when she's introduced to how she ends up, is part of the magic of the text, is that you do come to see her in a different light. And it makes her more complicated and messy, like you said, Thomas, that I'm not sure how to feel about her by the end of the movie.
The Thomas stuff, Elder Thomas and the daughter Ellie stuff, I'm not so sure if I think it's probably the part that has the biggest hiccup for me in the film. Or so with Pi, the entire time you're with Max. You're always like, the camera's always with Max. You never see a scene where Max is not in it. You don't get like the stock market breaking down and the president calling somebody, or like a boardroom meeting of the corporation that's trying to hire him on to control the stock market or have picks. And for the most part, you're with Charlie in this film.
Mm-hmm.
You're always in the house, right? Or always in the apartment. But for the most part, you're with Charlie, except for the opening, which takes place with the bus arriving. That's where Elder Thomas gets off, presumably, whenever he is drugged with with Ambien. And so that Ellie and Thomas can have their conversations. And Liz and Thomas having the conversation out on the porch, which he overhears. The Thomas character is interesting because he says that he's not repulsed by the homosexuality or by Charlie's obesity. At the end, whenever he's being honest, he says, that he is. And he's still, at the very end, still trying to convert him. Like, he doesn't have, I think a different film or a different thing would have him understand that humans are all types of people are humans, right? That homosexuality is okay. But the film doesn't allow for him to have that. He's excited that he's going back into the church, even that he's going back into the fold of and being even more who he was at the beginning of the film, which is just a false front.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting, messy piece to this, right? Is that another reason that I don't think that Aronofsky is necessarily preaching to us, because he's not made to be demonic at the end. He's a person who has his own path that he's following, and I think as the viewer we see it, he's wrong, but it's not. There's no scoring of the music that does that. There's no camera angles that do that. He's young and dumb still.
His story ends off screen, right? We hear about it.
Oh, what happens with Thomas off screen?
His daughter sent the videos and the message to his family, and
he goes back. Yeah,
because the surprising thing of that is that the family said, "It's okay, we love you, come home."
And he thinks that his daughter. I mean, the interesting thing is his daughter evil or not? Because there's we need to talk about Kevin. Is that the movie?
Yeah,
there's a part to that, right? Because she does she breaks the. I mean, presumably she breaks the plate that's feeding the birds.
Mm-hmm.
For no reason other than just to be a little shit.
So Hunter talks a little bit about, Charlie and Ellie's relationship and how complicated it is, that it's both optimistic and destructive. And Charlie for himself, it's self-destructive. And he likes the fact that it's messy because he thinks that's the tragedy of the play, that you're not entirely sure when Fraser, because he is so optimistic about human nature and how seeing the good in people, despite how self-destructive he has become with himself, he sees everything that she does as something good. As a viewer who has actually raised kids, I'm not so sure, and I don't know if the ending, when he kind of ascends, if he is kind of fooling himself or not. And the fact that I don't get an answer is something that I've thought about, having watched the movie like 3 or 4 days ago, a lot. That I'm not entirely sure. And I like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much like just nuance in there where he has a kid. Like, it seems like he was in a heterosexual relationship to have a kid.
Mm-hmm.
As what the wife says. I bet she was an alcoholic prior, but I mean, I don't think he drove her to alcoholism by leaving. I think that she probably was prior. And this was like the compromise between them, is that he would help take care of her as long as he could have a kid.
Yep.
And then the heart desires, I guess, what it does. And he made a bad decision, which was the only decision that he could make at the time.
Mm-hmm.
because he fell in love with somebody else, or actually fell in love as opposed to an arrangement.
And, reading the interview with Hunter that now that he has a daughter of his own and how it kind of changes him seeing the characters and the plot of the story, it makes me think of like Steven Spielberg making Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where Richard Dreyfuss is like, bye, everybody, gets on the ship and flies away. and this was before he had kids. And Spielberg often talks he could not make that movie today because he would think that guy was making a horrible decision leaving his family. It's very messy. I agree with you. I really like how messy it is once you start digging through the interactions with the characters.
On the point of the ending, can I just say one thing that Jenny and I talked about while watching the last scene is that he's walking towards his daughter, right? And then he dies. And in the immediate aftermath of this, he probably falls on her. That's probably not great. And then Ken, as a parent, I personally felt that this last moment that he had with his daughter, which was nice for him, is like a life destroying moment for her. She's going to be struggling with this conversation and the expectations he's placed on her,
Every time someone mentions Melville, the rest of her life, she's just going to start shivering and crying. You're right. Total PTSD. So the realism part, so sometimes in my line of work, I worked with guys like the size of Charlie in this movie as clients for caregiving and whatnot. There are a couple things that kind of bug me about this. One was that he never went to the hospital. Guys that size, usually diabetes and, sometimes they lose toes or feet that have to be taken out. And also living on the second floor of an apartment.
Yeah.
Who the fuck lives below him? That's got to be like the worst apartment in Idaho.
Do you remember, I think I was a teenager when the 1,000-pound person died in New York and they had to break out the window to crane her out. That's what this reminded me of a little bit, was just as far as him not going to the hospital because that person hadn't left that apartment in a decade or something.
Yeah. And when he gets his blood pressure taken after that initial scene where he's jacking off and she comes in, it was like 2-something over 160 something.
234. Yeah.
Oh my God. I just hearing that, my heart kind of wanted to explode inside my chest.
I wonder if Aronofsky was like, I wonder if we could nudge it to 314.
He probably looked into it as like, what's the highest it could be?
Yeah.
Without, like, the person
Can I get to pi? Yeah. Well, speaking of pi in this film, I know one of the things that you liked, Ken, was that you have the neighbor girl with the calculator as a nice opening and closing, right? There's symmetry there. I think it's interesting that I think a lesser film would have tried to do something the same with the Oregon coast. Like instead of opening with a bus arriving, dropping off Elder Thomas. His name's not Elder Thomas in the film, it's just Thomas, but that's how we're differentiating him.
From you.
From me, yeah. Because I did they cut my part out of the film. So you open with that bus, but you don't actually get any mention of the Oregon coast whatsoever until the last act of the film when he's with his wife talking about the vacation they once took.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lesser film would have had that throughout, right? It would have had like, that's how we open, is with the ocean and ocean sounds and a sense of like, oh, we're the whales in the ocean or something, like some type of some type of association there.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't do that. We just have a story that's almost at the very end. It almost seems unrelated. Like there's no telegraphing of it.
Yeah, agreed. I think that and the whole idea of expanding movies based on plays and not doing that shows a lot of confidence Aronofsky has in himself as a storyteller and in the material. Yeah.
I was really concerned that he, as Brendan Fraser's character is talking, as Charlie's talking, that he was going to say that he had a great time at the Oregon coast in the water. And I'm glad to hear that, no, that is not true. It is frigid and cold and terrible. There's something interesting because the first thing I think he binges on is a bucket of chicken, right? And there's something in his eyes where it's not like pleasurable. It's a like he disappears somehow behind his eyes as he's doing it, and it's not. There's a pleasantness to it. It seems like internally for him, but it's not like a pleasurable rush.
Yeah,
and it's not graphic in any way, right? It is on the other side of it. It's not like he's because I recalled the movie from I was watching it from the first time is that when he eats, it's like destructive. Like he's like doing it against, like he doesn't like he's force feeding himself, and I don't think that that's there in the film in my second watching, but it did seem to be the case in the first.
And this is all stuff that you missed, right, Ryan?
Which parts?
The parts that we were just talking about of Brendan Fraser eating.
Yes, I saw the man eat some.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know the particulars of the scenario, but I thought this was a very. Should I just launch into the other part of my take now? Is now a good time? I don't want to.
Oh, this is a new bit on the show. It's called Ryan's Rant. So Thomas and I are going to mute ourselves for 5 minutes, and we're going to listen to Ryan rant about the whale.
Minutes. It shouldn't take 5.
I'm going to take some Ambien.
Okay. Last time Aronofsky was in director jail, he found Mickey Rourke and made The Wrestler a low-budget character study, taking a washed-up actor and placing a spotlight on them to reinvigorate their career, and in the process, gain himself some prestige, get back in Hollywood's good graces, and get the opportunity to make bananas Aronofsky again. My favorite Moda Aronofsky. And then he makes Mother. He makes Noah, which failed, and then Mother.
No. Noah was his only number one. Noah was a success.
Noah was a certain kind. Noah was not the success that the studio was hoping for.
Okay.
Big but Lord of the Rings, 10 Commandments.
The Passion
returns. Yes.
Yeah.
The studio was hoping for the Passion. So yes, it was. I think he made his money back in it, and I don't think in hindsight it was disappointing, but that combined with Mother, I think ends him up in director jail again. He finds Brendan Fraser. He picks this script. He games out how he can. It's a repeat performance, take a character study and a washed up actor, put the actor into the role, which resonates with them personally because Mickey Rourke was a boxer and Fraser was overweight after the mummy stuff that happened to him. And so this all just feels very rote and formulaic and manufactured to get the results that he got, which is a return to big budget prestige filmmaking, some Oscar notches for him and Fraser. And everything I watched I felt like he was playing the hits with the Addiction, recalling Requiem for a Dream, the spiritual quest that ends in the main character going to heaven, in my opinion. From these other movies, the wrestlers' character dynamics are repeated. All the faces are different, but their roles are the same. But to your point earlier, Ken, and to give Aronofsky perhaps the benefit of the doubt, this is a filmmaker who has these certain things that he returns to. He is obsessed with these subjects. I am speculating about his motives, but they might be 1000% genuine, and I could just be an asshole.
He wanted to make it into a movie from the moment he saw the play in 2012?
Yeah. I mean, yes, but also I guess the question is, like, did the pandemic force him to do it? Like, I always think when I hear stories like that, how much of that is retroactive? But yeah, I mean, supposedly that's the case. He says that's the case.
Aronofsky, I mean, the reason the play, when he saw it, spoke to him is because all of those things fulfill what gives him passion to tell the story on the big screen. And it goes all the way back to pie, because a lot of pie, not just the pizza pie, but a lot of The Whale and The Pie, you could definitely tell it's the same filmmaker. And I think he is much more confident now, obviously, having made a bunch of, but this is like a different gear for him. And I think that's him flexing as a filmmaker. I don't think it's anything cynical like I'm going to remake The Wrestler, which he did when Black Swan and The Wrestler are pretty much the same movie. Yeah. Those are just the stories he likes to tell.
I think I respect your opinion and I don't.
But I'm an idiot?
No, not at all. I think both opinions are equally valid in my mind. Is there anything new that The Whale is saying that is not in his other movies? All of his movies seem to have a new component to the, cosmos, according to Aronofsky. But honestly, I did not watch this whole movie, so maybe it is something I missed. But is there something, or do you feel it's just like a distillation? It's like the finely tuned, the proof of a master at work is this finely tuned machine that is similar to his other movies, but is in this small space, is honed to kind of a diamond. Is that?
Well, yeah, I think a lesser director would have had some trepidation about making something so confined that's stage set. And
A lesser director would have drilled his head?
Yes. Yeah, no, I think a lesser director would have tried to expand the story more and get out of the apartment more. And I know that was something where when Hunter and Aronofsky were talking about adapting it, that's what Hunter went into thinking. And Aronofsky was the one that wanted it to kind of be the play. And I think that shows a lot of confidence as a filmmaker. I don't think he would have had the confidence back in 1998.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I guess it's weird. It's an interesting question. I think it's an interesting question that comes out with Aronofsky, maybe because he deals with religion and obsession, to even ask that question in the first place, Ryan. Because it'd be odd to say, like, why did Eastwood make that movie? Or why did Michael Mann make that movie? Or why did Bigelow make that movie? Like, there's some things, like, what new thing are they saying with this?
Well,
because I think for Aronofsky, there's a lot of technical portions to his craft that this is definitely different than any of his other films.
Yes, I think all of that is, I think all of those points are true. This in part, right, comes down to my not being an auteurist. Hollywood is an industry and directors have to do sometimes what they have to do to make the movies that they want to make. My feeling, and this also goes to taste, right? I love the big budget gonzo. Give me 100 Noahs, Aronofsky. Like, make that until the end of the time, and I will be there every opening day. So we really have different things that we like about his style and approach, and the way he approaches his themes. I feel like he wants to make the big gonzo thing, and that's where his passions lie. And this is the this is the one for them that he has to make to get another one for him. But doing one for them, to me, is a big studio movie that makes a lot of money. This is a relatively small movie, people working for scale. I don't see how this is necessarily one for them, if not just, you're saying he just did this to reestablish himself as a bankable director. Yes, this reminds people that he is a prestigious filmmaker who can get Academy Award nominations and generate a huge return off of a fairly small budget at any time he wants. And it's just a question of whether or not he wants to at the time. I don't think he had I can't imagine that he would be deluded enough to think that Noah and Mother were going to be these gigantic hits, Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, that also, you're forgetting how difficult it is to get any movie made. How many people it has to go through, how financing, distribution. So
that's exactly why
it's not just like he had a script called The Whale sitting around. It's like, I can start shooting this in 2 weeks. He's not like Clint Eastwood where he just takes something and he can shoot it. I mean, it has to go through a lot of permutations before it's made. It takes.
Well, yeah. I'm saying, like, you make Mother, and you're not the affair with Jennifer Lawrence became such a gossip story. He came out of that looking very bad. His interviews, he looked bad. Like, people didn't like the movie. They didn't like what he was saying about it. They didn't like him as a celebrity. And so I don't think it's that cynical for him to then reel back and say, okay, the last time I took this approach with the wrestler, I got right back where I wanted to be, and I made Black Swan, in my view, one of the most successful iterations of his thing. And I don't think it's just like Todd Field doing commercial work till someone will give him money to make Tar. It's an economic choice that he's making.
I think I agree with. I mean, I definitely see where Ryan's coming. I think I think that there is the question maybe comes down to: is it true that Aronofsky asked the playwright to work on the script, maybe even paid him to do so, and they've been working on it for 10 years? And if that's the case, then I think that it really changes the idea or the narrative there. That maybe there's always something that's going to be opportunistic, right? Like, oh, this is a film that we can make for $3 million during COVID times, and I could get it made. And I need to get out of director jail for Mother.
And as we go along in Aronofsky, we'll see a bunch of movies that were in development that didn't happen. And this was one of them that did happen. And one of the reasons it did is because it was relatively low cost.
Yeah. And to my, I can see how obviously I don't like this movie, and my observation or my supposition about Aronofsky's approach to filmmaking is part of my argument for why I don't like it. But I think there are a lot of directors who calculate their career to bob and weave with their budgets so that they can be smart about not ending up in the Shane Carruth situation. If Shane Carruth had 3 movies that were upstream color size that he was working on while trying to get his big budgets, he would have been making movies this whole time while trying to get his big thing off the ground, and there are I think it's a very canny way. Ridley Scott, who we disagree on, Ken, but whenever he gets in trouble for popping off too much, he goes and he makes Gladiator 2, and I think that is cynical on his part too, but I don't think it makes him a bad artist, I don't think for me, it doesn't impact my opinion of the art.
Yeah, so it doesn't really seem. I don't think this is necessarily one for them. I don't think it's as passion project as maybe Bird was for Eastwood.
Right.
I don't think. I honestly, maybe as we look through this series, it's a question to come back to. Is I don't think Aronofsky really ever does one for them.
That's what I think makes this. That is why. Again, I am very, very biased about this movie from the start, as you guys know. Just the idea I reject. So. Maybe everything stems from that, but I just feel, I felt like there wasn't very much new that he was bringing to these subjects. I felt he picked a structure and limitations that he knew, to your guys' points, that he had the cinematic mastery to take a fat suit in one room and make a movie out of it. It feels, to me, it feels very cynical and craven and calculated. But then again, rolling into the movie, that was what I thought of it already. So this might be just an expression of my biases.
Yeah, I wonder, would you feel the same way about watching the production, like watching the play of somebody in a fat suit, where you know that it's fake, but the subject's still the same?
Yes, I would not. As soon as I told Jenny the title of this movie and what the subject matter was, her first words were "shallow how," and that is immediately what I thought of when I read this movie. If the playwright were 600 pounds and if he were starring in this adaptation of his play, then I would go see it. Other than that, I don't have any. I have been fat and I have struggled with body image issues my whole life, and I think that this is a very toxic thing to put into the culture for people who have dysmorphic issues. And it's just not gonna. There's almost nothing that this man could do to make me buy the premise.
I understand all of that, but I guess my question is do we just not tell stories about people like that? And if we do tell the stories, who is the one that gets to dictate how that story looks?
Make a movie about a fat person that isn't about them being fat, like you would with any other type of person. And that's across the spectrum with identitarian issues and wokeism, if that's how, as it's commonly referred. That's all anyone is asking, right? Make a movie with a lesbian where it's not about her being a lesbian. Make a movie with a Black person where it's not about them being Black. Make a movie with a fat person where the subject matter is something other than their weight, because when fat people walk around in the world, society is the one that constantly reminds people that they're fat and unacceptable. It's not the person, you know?
Yeah, there's two parts of that. He's not walking around in society. He's clustered himself off.
No, where he's walking around in
pathological
society
way.
by peeing and put on a 50-foot screen in every megaplex in the country. That's how he's walking around in society.
It sounds to me like you're criticizing the movie not for what it is, but what it isn't.
Yeah, because there's no, like, how would this film isn't about him?
As you guys describe, his central issue could be anything. He could be drinking himself to death out of sorrow and guilt. He could be doing drugs. He could be designing computer programs to list the name of God. He could be doing anything. And they chose to make it about being fat, which is something that they're over 50% of the country is fat. And there are gossip shows, most Aronofsky movies are on HBO Max right now. So I went to HBO Max to search for this movie and I typed in The Whale, and the top 3 results were My 600-Pound Life, My 600-Pound Life Part 2, and My 1,200-Pound Family, which is about 2 twin sisters who are both 600 pounds.
And those are about the fetishization of that, right?
Which
of
is what this movie is. This movie is a fetishization of fatness, and it's saying this is a flaw. This is a terrible, you are disgusting monster. And it's Beauty and the Beast where we learn that it is okay to accept a fat person because you know what? They have feelings too. That is the lesson of this movie, and it's repugnant.
I don't think
he's a character. He's not representing an entire group of people. It's just
that's what a character is. That's what listen to the word representation, representation. Anytime you are showing something in a motion picture, you are representing an idea found in society to the public at large in order to comment on it. This is representing obesity in order to comment on obesity. And the comment made about obesity is that it's freakish, the result of psychological problems. It is a character failure that this man is fat. It's not a biological issue. And the way...
Okay, but how do you deal with the fact that he was overweight and he was part of that 50%, 50% before his lover died, and his lover was completely comfortable with his weight at that time, as was he, and he was a member of society?
I don't know. I don't know about that because I didn't see that part of the film, Thomas. But I don't. I don't.
So I think there's two things here, right?
We're talking about
one is the movie being sensationalizing of this aspect, and can a person who doesn't have this aspect write it, and can it be portrayed by people who
it is
don't
not
all
about
have this
it
aspect?
Is not about can a person write this character. It is about can a person write a character where the difference between the author and the character is not the sole focus of that character. A white person can write a Black person. A white person ought not write about a Black person's experience of a white society. A skinny person can write a fat person. A skinny person ought not write a movie about a fat person's experience of society.
Well, that's not what this movie is. I think that he is a very specific character, and I think the way the film is made almost addresses what you are saying. And by the halfway point of the movie, I don't even see it anymore. And that's kind of the point.
That is the trick. The trick is, let me take this disgusting beast and turn it into a human for you. That is the trick of the movie, is saying this thing at the beginning is a slimy, disgusting, repugnant monster. Allow me to show you that there is actually a human inside.
And how is that different than Philadelphia?
Philadelphia was an activist movie meant to humanize the queer person who theretofore in society was dehumanized. Queer people make up less than 10% of the population. We're stigmatized as minorities. before then, fat people are over 50% of the population and are stigmatized publicly to sell shit. Like,
Yeah, but this is a guy who is morbidly obese and eating himself to death. So it's a very specific, it's not all, I don't think he represents every fat person because not every fat person is morbidly obese. That's very specific.
He represents every fat person because fat people are so rarely represented. And when they are, it's about them being fat. That's the nature. Cinema is the representation of society in a public culture in a way that we discuss.
Here's the hard part. Here's the hard part with with that argument, I guess, for me, Ryan, is let's assume that is not let's just assume potentially that Ken is right, that this film isn't actually what you're saying that it is, and it is a depiction that is what you're asking for. How would you ever know, because you wouldn't ever watch it?
It wouldn't, because a fat person wouldn't make this movie, Thomas. That's the whole point.
Okay.
Is that no one, and it is what I say it is. You can think that it's for good and it's worth it. But the cinematic approach of that first shot is, this is a monster. By the end of the movie, this is no longer a monster. This is a human you can love. You can think that's a good evolution of a character and that the meaning of the story redeems it or justifies it, what have you. But we're not arguing about what it is. We're just arguing about its utility in society.
And I guess if this film was 40 years earlier, do you think there would be the weight would be the main thing, or the homosexuality?
It is.
We haven't even talked about the fact that he's gay.
To the, I think, I don't think his particular mental issue is, I think that is a means to an end. I don't think the movie considers his point of view or what it's really like to be him. It's considering what you think of him. It is a lot like how, I discussed William Wyler. William Wyler has a bottle movie about queer people called The Children's Hour. Very similar and also equally, upsetting with its treatment of lesbians. But to your point, this movie and that movie are the same thing. And 50 years ago, you could do it just about being queer, but we accept queer people now, so you got to give them something else,
I mean, this is a really very KNOT naughty discussion. I don't think we're going to get to the bottom of it. And we can start talking about Dallas Buyers Club, all kinds of 21st century movies that in 2023 would be equally as problematic for a lot of people.
100%.
Based on who is cast and what it's about.
And I just want to thank you for letting me get out my piece. I think you guys are lovely people. I think you have a lot of fascinating things to say about this movie, and I'm glad I was here for you guys to unpack it. I don't want you to think that just because I dislike this movie that says
no. It's hot content, man.
Yeah, and it has me question my reactions to your reactions, Ryan, by actually hearing your thoughts behind it.
That's all, that's what the greatest thing about art is, that it allows us to discuss stuff like this. And in that way, I think this is a very valuable contribution. And I don't, as much as I say shit about Aronofsky, I'm going to be there opening day, whatever the next thing is, whatever the next whirly gig.
Yeah, and I maybe even to your point, as I think on it, one of the things that did not sit well with me in the film on both viewings is that there's a moment, Ryan, towards the very end before Charlie breaks his laptop, where he sends out a mass email, and he said to his students, he says, like, just write me something true or something,
Mm-hmm,
right? Like,
mm-hmm.
Fuck this 5-paragraph essay stuff. Just write me something that's true. And he gets on the webcam like a week later, and he's being let go. He self-sabotaged himself out of a job. And he then, at that moment, reads a bunch of people's truth stuff, and then he shows his truth by turning on the camera. And that both times seemed like the reaction of the students. Some of them don't care, but some of them are looking at him like I imagine that people on HBO Max trying to find the well, watching those other films or those other shows, reality television shows, might react to.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that, like it's for me, it was an odd reaction. Like
Mhm.
it seemed like it was forced by the movie to have people react. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't really live in most of America. I live in the People's Republic of Portland.
Yeah, it's true. I did. I think the essay is so freaking sweet, and I think the reason why he loves it, her insight into the nature and the meaning of art, is so pure and beautiful. I don't know if a kid actually wrote that essay, but it nails. I have a 6-year-old, and she distills shit all the time. That's like, wow, that is really the only thing we're doing here, isn't it? And I felt like her observation about Moby Dick was beautiful in that way.
So that thing about him writing "Want Something Honest and Real" is based on something that Hunter, the writer, actually did for very similar reasons. And I think the main quote is the person said, "I'm scared that my life will be boring." That was something that someone actually said when he put out that email, taken from real life.
I guess, yeah. My only note one of my other notes on the film, as you said that, which is weird, just the synchronicity there. Maybe we're all in a pattern. Maybe it's like the Da Vinci spiral thing. Is that I wish the film, and maybe this is also because I've been locked in because of the ice storm and been watching longer films. Just watched Once Upon a Time in the West last night. Is I wish maybe the film could have been a little bit more of a film by being a little bit more boring. Like we could show a little bit more of his loneliness and isolation. And so that's something you can do with film a little bit because you get to focus the attention and you get other cues by being behind a camera as opposed to being up on a stage.
That's a great point. Well, after watching the movie, I was talking to my wife about, like, in my experience of having clients of guys that size, is that the one thing the movie doesn't really address is just how lonely those guys were. I mean, they would live in a duplex with like some guy who was like a sex offender. The only people they had really was their caregiver that would come in once or twice a week. And they sat there watching TV. So by him having this job, this remote job, pretty cool. He has a job. And then having his caretaker, whatever she was, come in frequently. The loneliness part, yeah, Thomas, I think that's one thing that it was missing for me, is how isolated he is, but he still seemed to have a pretty full life.
I mean, it's a play. People are constantly knocking on his door. It's like Three's Company too, right? Like holy shit! Like in a few minutes, he has both Thomas, elder Thomas, and his nurse friend, boyfriend's sister all show up, and then towards the end, like his daughter. I guess it makes sense that the mother and the daughter come at the same time, but like, yeah, there's just like a plethora of people. I think there'd be more scenes like between him and the delivery person. Or like whenever he drops the key and he can't get to it, right? Like a prolonged moments of him just like not having anyone around, just being lonely, having just the birds outside, and sometimes not even that.
I think he. I wonder if anyone's ever asked Aronofsky about Oliver Stone, because they both have this, like, the movie starts and where the pedals all the way down, RPMs are running at 9,000 until the movie ends. And I wonder if he likes Stone, if Stone was an influence at all. Because could Aronofsky stop a movie in the middle and give you that silence? It seems so counterintuitive to his.
I feel like there's a lot of boring parts in The Fountain and Noah, but I have to go back and watch them, not in the theater.
Fair.
Yeah, and we do our Stoned Immaculate season of Oliver Stone movies. Maybe we could draw them.
I would love. I think it's so fascinating how important he was and how forgotten he is, and I don't even know if I would like any of his movies anymore. But I would love to have an excuse to watch.
It definitely seems like they're of an era. Like I tried watching Clerks a couple months ago, and it is terrible. Like it is definitely of its time. And I just realized something in saying that about Noah and the Fountain having boring parts. The way with the temporal pincer movement, FML, we're going to watch both of those films together and talk about them.
I love it. Oh, I love it.
Can't wait. All right, are we done talking about the whale?
Everything's coming up, Millhouse.
Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap this up.
All right, go for it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, am I wrapping it up? Oh, you
no,
want me to start?
no,
Okay.
I will. No, that was part 2 of
Chapter 1.
chapter 1.
Darren Aronofsky. Join us for chapter 2, which will be part 1 of our next pairing, which will be, what is it? It's Requiem for a Dream
Requiem.
and Mother with an exclamation mark.
Point.
And Ryan, I want you to do a synopsis of Mother, but sung to the Danzig song. So I'm going to expect 60 seconds of you turning the lyrics of Mother into the synopsis of the film.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and thank you again, Ryan, for the theme song.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And if we ever get that second listener, you can follow us on Patricia Smith message boards. Happy birthday, Patricia. It's a little belated. You can find us lurking on the British gift site, Bangers and Mash. There's also that other British site, Plenty of Fish and Chips, Pinmate, X, whatever Facebook has now, Instagram, those other things as well. LinkedIn, MySpace.
I think you guys should make the hub of all of your social activity LinkedIn. Just a fantastic flex. You'd be the only ones.
We'll talk about that off mic.
All right. I got some two pieces of pizza to go eat at the same time, guys.
Put some mayonnaise on that.
Will do. Thanks again, guys.
Yeah, we're watching you, listener.
Yep.
Together that makes us flash gorgeous. I'm not talking at you. I'm talking to you. I don't want to hear about you. I want to hear from you. 10-4, buddies. Destroy. Kill all hippies.
I don't hate it. I just don't know why you strayed from the formula.
You bastards. You don't know it, Bob. I'm an artist. And I must reflect that in my writing.
Darren Aronofsky, we're watching you.
Ken is right.